Hello guys and welcome back to our channel. Today I want to talk about Exhale Static. I actually did a video about Exhale Static a couple of years ago. If you haven't seen this video, the link is going to be as always in the description. But today I want to clarify a couple of things. First of all, I want to explain the difference between two approaches, how different freedivers train Exhale Static. Also, I want to point out a couple of safety issues which I didn't mention on the first video. And if you're first time here, my name is Sergey, I'm a freediving instructor trainer, and on this channel I'm sharing with all of you guys everything what I know about freediving. First of all, two different school of thoughts about how to do Exhale Static. Some freedivers, include me, do Exhale Static as a relaxation exercise, as a way to become more comfortable during your depth training. So for example, if I don't dive for a while for whatever reason, maybe it's a new quarantine or maybe I'm traveling, so any reason, if I'm not diving regularly, then my first or maybe even second open water session, I feel a little bit uncomfortable. And the same of course with my students. If for example someone did the level 1 and then have a long break, let's say, I don't know, maybe a few months, 3 months, 6 months of no diving, then it's going to be really difficult for such person to come back and immediately start doing level 2 or even level 3. Let's say if you finish your level 2 and then you're coming and you're ready to start level 3, it's probably going to be a little bit difficult in the beginning. Of course, any dry simulation of actual diving condition, it can be done only to a certain degree, because again, freediving is really unique. So this condition when your body and especially your lungs is compressed during your dive is pretty hard to simulate on a dry land. However, we can kind of try to simulate it with the Exhale Static, because remember, your contractions, your urge to breathe, your discomfort during the dive is not only because of the increased level of CO2, but it's also because when your lungs becoming smaller in size, for your respiratory center it is a signal that you need to inhale. So this is why your central nervous system can be confused when your lungs is compressing during the dive and you're not inhaling. If you're a beginner freediver, it can be confusion for your central nervous system. So this is why, in my opinion, Exhale Static can be helpful. This is why I'm doing Exhale Static, and this is why I'm doing Exhale Static with my students. So how this Exhale Static looks like? We do relaxation breathing and then we do relatively easy breath hold after exhale. So for example, a few days ago I have a few students who was doing this type of training for the first time, and how we did with them, we did relaxation breathing, then only 20 seconds breath hold, relaxation breathing 30 seconds breath hold, relaxation breathing 40 seconds ago, and we did it up to 60 seconds. And even this small breath hold, I was telling them, if you have your urge to breathe before the time which we need to finish the breath hold, then you can finish early. So for example, if our plan is to hold the breath for 40 seconds but your urge to breathe is coming to 35, then you can start breathing early. So once again, the goal of such exercise is a pure relaxation, is to become comfortable during this unique situation when your lungs is smaller than its normal size for a prolonged period of time. So relaxation, this is a goal of this exercise. This is why I personally never do hyperventilation before this exercise, and I don't normally hold the breath longer than contractions. Occasionally I do it longer than my contraction starts, so occasionally I want to check what is how long I can hold it after full exhale, and then really rarely I sometimes keep holding my breath even with some contractions, but it's relatively rarely. And I never do it with my students. With my students I like to do it until the contraction starts. So 20 seconds, 30 seconds, 40 seconds, 50 seconds, maybe 60 seconds. And how often you can do this type of training? You can do it relatively often, because this training is not intense. Remember, the frequency of your training depends on how intense your training session. And since these type of sessions, training sessions, are not intense at all, because it is more like relaxation breath hold, then you can do it relatively often, maybe 4 or 5 times per week. I mean, I don't think that it is a good idea to do it every day, but like 4 or 5 times per week, no problem with this. Another approach of exhale static is to use the exhale static training in a way to become as much hypoxic as possible. And this is a completely different story. In this case, these people who training exhale static for this reason, they do, let's say, hyperventilation, and then they hold the breath. Again, some people hold it until first contractions, or some people hold it as long as possible. So for obvious reason, this second type of exhale static is much more dangerous in terms of the possibilities of have a blackout. This is why you can see that people, when they do like this second type of training, they usually finish their breath hold with the blue lips and with a slightly whitish face, because the goal of their exercise is to become as much hypoxic as possible. So they, I guess, training, I don't know, they may be training their body to be okay to be hypoxic. So I personally don't train like this, and I don't train with my students like this for sure. I think for the high level athletes it's possible. So if, for example, your breath hold is longer than 6, maybe 7 minutes, then maybe it makes sense. However, most of my students is people who trying to reach 2, 3, 4 minutes, and for them this type of training is definitely not necessary. We don't need to train high hypoxia for these small numbers. Okay, so one more time, 2 different approach to do exhale static. First, this is my approach, this is an approach in our school, is to do exhale static as a relaxation exercise. Is the way how to become more comfortable when your lungs is much smaller compared to its normal size. And the second way, it's the people who let's say quite often they do hyperventilation and then they do exhale static. So in this case, their goal is to becoming as much hypoxic as possible in the shortest period of time, because remember, if you do exhale static, of course you have less air in your lungs. Of course, the oxygen is going to drop down in your body much faster. And since now you're understanding the 2 completely different approach to exhale static, you can even say that this is the same exercise. It's 2 completely different exercise. Now I want you to discuss 2 things. First of all, is it possible to do exhale static in the water? I personally never do exhale static in the water, and we never do exhale static in the water in our school. So for the last I don't know, 6 years during which our school exists, we never done exhale static with our students in the water. Why I don't do it and why I don't do it with the students? 2 reasons. It doesn't make that much sense for me to do exhale static in the water. I don't see how it can be like beneficial. However, it can be more dangerous in case if you have a blackout. So if you have a blackout, then there is a higher chance, theoretically higher chance, that this freediver, after he has a blackout, can inhale the water. Again, it's not 100% proven fact, but theoretically it makes sense. So if you do exhale static and you do it in a pool and you lost your conscious, then there is a higher chance to inhale the water. So for these 2 reasons, actually mainly for first reason, I don't do myself exhale static in the water, and we don't do it with my students. However, guys, again, if for whatever reason you want to do exhale static in the water, I don't know what is the reason, I don't know what kind of theory you have in your mind when you're planning to do exhale static in the water, but thinking about this way. If you do it as a pure relaxation exercise, if you are planning to do your exhale static in the water, of course with a partner, so this is not discussable, there is no variation of this rule. if you do any type of training in the water, it's always with a freediving body. So if for whatever reason you want to do exhale static in the water, because I know that some people do, then at least do only first type of training as a relaxation exercise. Don't ever try to do it as a hypoxic exercise in the water, because in this case the chance of LMC and blackout much higher, and this is why the exercise becoming like quite dangerous. So one more time, if you want to do exhale static in the water, I personally don't like this idea, I don't do it myself, but if you want to do it only as a first exercise, only as a relaxation exercise, and of course always with a certified freediver, with experienced freediver. And one more thing which I want to discuss, let's say if you do exhale static dry, if you do it on a dry land, what position it's better to have. And why we have recently such discussion about the position during the dry exhale static, because there was one guy who actually recently shared his experience. He was doing exhale static as a second way with a massive hyperventilation, and he was pushing, like he was trying to hold it as much as possible, so he having a lot of contractions, and then eventually he have a blackout. And when he have a blackout, he didn't start breathing immediately, and he was like lying on the floor or in his bed. I don't remember exactly where he was doing this exercise. He was lying for a while, like without start breathing again. And there is a danger if you do it in a lying position, that might be, again, theoretical possibilities that your tongue is gonna block your airways, and maybe this was in his case the reason why he didn't start breathing immediately. Because remember, most of the time if you do a dry static, let's say full lungs, and you have a blackout, you lose your conscious, and then immediately you start breathing. And in case of this person, I think he was doing lie down, also with a nose clip, and when he lost his conscious, he didn't start breathing immediately. How he found it out? Because he was filming himself with a GoPro, and when he finally woke up and he checked his footage, he saw that after he blacked out, he spent some time without start breathing again. And this is pretty scary, because majority of freedivers, they do dry static alone. So it's pretty scary if such situation can happen. So what is my opinion about this situation of this person? Again, this exercise was done in a second mode. The person was doing massive hyperventilation, and then he was holding his breath with a lot of contractions as a way to push his hypoxic limits as much as possible, and then he has a blackout. Okay, so now answering the question, what is a better position for exhale static if you do it dry? If you do it as a relaxation exercise, I don't see any difference in a position. I personally prefer to do it when I'm lying down. Sometimes I do it when I'm sitting like this, with the legs crossed, like kind of lotus position. I normally don't do it with a nose clip, just because I don't want to do it with a nose clip. But if you do it as a relaxation exercise, if you don't do any hyperventilation and you don't push your limits, you just hold it until first contractions, then I don't see there is any differences in what position you do it, with a nose clip or without. However, if for whatever reason you want to push yourself until your hypoxic limits, so for example you do hyperventilation and then you hold it like with the contractions, you struggling through the contractions and trying to hold it as long as possible, in this case hypoxic event more likely to happen. And this is why I think it's going to be more safe if you're going to be sitting in this kind of position, lotus position or any other sitting position. And it's probably better to do it without the nose clip, because again it was a speculation in Facebook, in the internet, among freedivers, that probably it's a good idea not to have a nose clip in this case as well. So guys, one more time as a summary, exhale static can be approached in two completely different ways. It's an exercise which can sound like it's the same, but it's two completely different exercise, whether you do it as a relaxation exercise or whether as you do it as an attempt to reach maximum hypoxia. In this case, it is a relaxation exercise. The blackout, the chance of blackout close to zero. And in this case, when you're pushing yourself with a hyperventilation and you're pushing through contractions, then the hypoxic event more likely gonna happen at some point. If you again do it dry but you're planning to push it, maybe it's a good idea to have a sitting position, and also maybe don't use a nose clip. In this case, probably it's gonna be a little bit more safer. But one more time, if you're a beginner freediver, I think it's make much more sense to do it as a relaxation exercise. Just relaxation breathing, no hyperventilation, short breath holds, relaxation breathing again, short breath holds, etc, etc, etc. It's my idea, it's the idea what we follow in our school. Okay guys, hopefully this video was helpful. If you still have some questions about Exhale static exercise, let me know in comments, and I will see you next time.